Good morning. Woo. Good to have everybody in the house this morning. It's so good to be here, and man, incredible day. We've got great, it could be pouring rain outside. Come on, this is a beautiful thing. Yeah, such a great group of people here, you all today. Welcome so much to the visitors, and we are going to be celebrating the baptism of 13 people today. Yeah, that is 13 people who are going to be making a public declaration of their faith in Jesus Christ. But not yet. Not yet. Before we get there, I want to explain something of the why. Why do we do this? Why do we do this? Well, on the one hand, many of us know why. But on the other hand, we need to be reminded, don't we? We need to stop everything and set aside time to just revel in the gift of God that has led to this moment. So to begin, I'm going to read a passage, a short passage from Mark 16, the last chapter of the Gospel of Mark, which we've been going through as Trav has been saying. And perhaps, man, that might be why this day has taken on fresh meaning for me. I've been a Christian for decades. But for some reason, the resurrection of Jesus Christ just continues to take on fresh vigor, strength, gravity, meaning. And maybe it's because we've been paying attention to Jesus for 6 months now and all that he's been saying since chapter 1. And what's really cool is that what I'm going to read to you today in this passage is the most important fact in human history, which is a bold statement, I know. And how do we even know that it's true? I'm going to read from this book. This book is at the center of the conversation, and it's the center of the celebration today. What many of you might not even know, you might read this book, you might know this book well, the Bible, is that this is the most reliably accurate historical account of ancient history that exists in the world. Do you know that's true? This isn't just Christians saying this, people who like the book. It's actually secular scholars will say, yeah, no, we don't have anything that is so well attested from ancient history as this book. The Gospels alone have thousands of manuscripts that corroborate what is in this book. Because we're going to celebrate something. Why celebrate something that we're not even sure it's true? And so we've got to look, what is the integrity of this thing? You know, this is the best-selling book in human history. Do you know that? There's an estimated 5 billion copies of this book sold. If the Bible was on the New York Times bestseller list, which it should be, it would have been the number one bestseller every single time since the bestseller list started. Did you know that? Man, why is that? Because actually there are other religious books that have sold a lot too. The Quran has sold 800 million copies estimated. Other religious books top the list, but then you have fiction books. Those are the next, and you have Tale of Two Cities. Man, I chewed my way through that one in high school. That sold over 100 million copies. You're never going to guess what the best-selling series of books is. It is Harry Potter. But it doesn't. How did that happen? I mean, good for J.K. Rowling. So how does the Bible eclipse them all by a long shot? Is it because it's a page turner of suspense and intrigue and, like wizards and warlocks? I don't think so. It's a wonderful narrative work. There are beautiful stories, but can we be honest? Let's be honest. It's Easter. It's often pretty mysterious and confusing and a bit hard to read. Am I wrong? I'm a pastor, and I fumble my way through this thing at times. But why the high demand? Well, I propose that it's because it's true. That from cover to cover, it's the most important source of truth known to mankind. And despite its mysterious nature, it will never cease to be in high demand. What a book. And as I said, I am about to read the most important thing contained in all of its pages. All right, is that enough setup for you? Because I'm just dying to get to it. It is profound as we look into the scriptures. 8 simple verses, but that tell this story. Mark 16, verse 1 says this: When the Sabbath was past, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome bought spices so that they might go and anoint him, speaking of Jesus, who was dead. And very early on the first day of the week, when the sun had risen, they went to the tomb. And they were saying to one another, "Who will roll away the stone? Who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance of the tomb?" And looking up, they saw that the stone had been rolled back. It was very large. And entering the tomb, they saw a young man sitting on the right side, dressed in a white robe. And they were alarmed. Other gospels say it was an angel. And he said to them, "Do not be alarmed. You seek Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He has risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him. But go, tell his disciples and Peter that he is going before you to Galilee. There you will see him just as he told you." And they went out and fled from the tomb, for trembling and astonishment had seized them. And they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. So many interesting things going on in this passage, one of which is that these gutsy ladies, number one, are willing to go into the tomb. And of course, they're wondering who's going to roll the stone away. They were just a few ladies that were going to do this thing and actually didn't have the capacity, but there you have it. It was open. I mean, would you go in the tomb of a guy who's been dead for 3 days? Even if you thought he might not be in there. I love that story of these women. The reason that story is also so important is because in ancient times, women just had less credibility. Like, if you wanted this story to have credibility, if you wanted it to stick, if you wanted people to believe it, it would have been guys. But we all know that the guys had scattered. I know. Easy, ladies. And the ladies were going to anoint his body. Love what Rebecca Wilson said in prayer this morning. She said, you know, Jesus had dashed their expectations in a sense. They thought that he was going to continue on to take them into freedom. And then he died. But they didn't run away. They drew near. Oh man, has your faith, has Jesus, has God in some way, shape, or form disappointed you? Have your expectations been somehow dashed in the midst of your faith journey? Can I just encourage you, draw near. Draw near this morning. Don't let others and the scattering and all of the different hullabaloo around faith and religion confuse you. Draw near. I love it too that it says, he has risen. That's what we celebrate. After all, he's not here, which is the most important fact in human history. Also, the most important event in human history. Jesus Christ, as accounted for in this ancient book of unparalleled accuracy, was brutally murdered and came back to life. And we know from the number of times that he said this is exactly what he was going to do, it's what he intended to do for us. You know, there's 89 chapters in the Gospels. 4 of them talk about the birth of Jesus. I love Christmas. I love the little baby Jesus. I love the whole, the trees, all that celebration. But the Gospels don't talk as much about that as it talks about this. Over half of those chapters talk about the resurrection. And Jesus, over and over and over and over and over and over and over, exhaustingly, he will not let us forget this is exactly what he came to do. Even if he had been born and died just like he said he would, and he had not been resurrected, Christianity would be nothing but a fable. It would just be a nice story that you tell your kids at bedtime. But instead, his resurrection was the pivot point of human history. and the literal game changer for every living person who ever was or ever will be. If it didn't happen, honestly, we should pack all this up and go home. Like, what is the point? I mean, the Apostle Paul himself said in 1 Corinthians 15:17, and if Christ has not been raised, your faith is worthless. You are still in your sins. This is what makes it the most important fact in human history. But what also makes this all nonsense if it's not true? I mean, what is this all for then? The baptisms, the kids' activities, I mean, it's actually just a silly game. I mean, the suit. You know, I came out in a suit today. But yeah. Now it seems like I'm looking for applause. It's not. But we make a big deal out of this because it's true. And if it wasn't, it's all nonsense. What's interesting is, and Paul doesn't say, and if Christ has not been raised, your faith is worthless, you're wasting your time. He actually says, you are still in your sins. Why? Well, that's what we're digging into today. What's interesting to me is the alternate theories about the resurrection. Have you heard these theories? There's many of them. I'm only going to touch on a few, but somehow, despite the historical accuracy, the power, the importance of it, people have tried to sort of explain it away. Did you know there's something called the swoon theory, that Jesus just fainted? I mean, we'll get to it, but we know that's not true. The hallucination theory says that Jesus preconditioned his disciples to hallucinate by means of hypnosis. Like hundreds and hundreds of people, he was able to do this. The vision theory, which is the disciples had experiences they interpreted or understood to be the appearance of Jesus. The legend or the myth theory, over time, these stories were exaggerated, embellished. The stolen body theory. The soldiers who guarded Jesus' body were actually bribed by the Jewish leaders to lie. The wrong tomb theory. Oh, no, it wasn't. It was down the road. If you pass the bush, you've gone too far. I think they had a pretty good idea of where he was buried. The mistaken identity theory. These women mistook someone else for Jesus. Jesus had an identical twin brother. That's another theory. It sounds funny, but very seriously, actually, the Quran says this, and I'm not trying to go after the Quran. If you're a Muslim here, actually, you're so welcome. I love to engage the conversation. I love for us to explore what is it that we believe in, why. But interestingly, the Quran actually says in Surah 4, 157, they declared, we have put to death the Messiah, Jesus, the son of Mary, the apostle of Allah. They did not kill him, nor did they crucify him, but they thought they did. The next verse says this, Allah took him up unto himself, which is quite something. And it's important because it creates the narrative that makes Jesus not God. That's what you would have to do, actually, to prove that Jesus wasn't God, is say this didn't happen. But if it did happen, it unequivocally proves that he is. Why not just say he was resurrected? Why all these theories? I mean, biblical history does account for people being taken up. Enoch, Elijah, even people dying and coming back to life, Lazarus, right? We've heard these stories, but it's death and resurrection, never to die again and to be taken up, that has never otherwise happened. And it's why Jesus is God. You know, we often think like, oh, religion, you know, it's a leap of faith, you know, we can't prove. Actually, faith in Jesus is a very short leap. Yes. Because no one else did this. God was not trying to leave it open for debate. He's like, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to send a guy and no one will ever do what he does and he will be resurrected on the third day. It's a short leap, actually. It's very easy to believe. God wanted to make it crystal clear that Jesus is the Son of God. And by the way, it was clear that he was dead. Mark 15, 44 and 45. Pilate the Roman ruler, was surprised to hear that he should have already died, speaking of Jesus. And summoning the centurion, he asked him whether he was already dead. And when he learned from the centurion he was dead, he granted the corpse to Joseph of Arimathea. Is he dead? Yes, he's dead. Are you sure he's dead? I'm sure he's dead. Did you check? Oh, I checked. And he's dead? Yeah, he's dead. He was dead! That's important. That's fundamental to this story. It was clear then that he was alive again. 1 Corinthians 15, just before what I read earlier, Paul's saying if he's not alive, your faith is useless, you're still in your sins. It says after that, he was seen by more than 500 of his followers at one time, most of whom are still alive, though some have died. The Apostle Paul is writing to Corinthians trying to make sure they understand the legitimacy of this claim. And he's saying, you can go ask the guys. They're still alive. I've actually had the pleasure of being in Corinth, walking around ancient Corinth and going, yeah, you could have just wandered around and asked some of the guys, some of the ladies, as we know there were. Did you see him? Yeah, I saw him. Was he dead? He was dead. I mean, I'm making it really simple, but this is why it is a short leap. I want to shift gears and just say, why do we need the resurrection? Why is this so important? Because that it happened is a parlor trick if we did not desperately need it. It was just cool, interesting, miraculous. Who knows? Who cares? But we needed it. Pastor Tim Keller, incredible teacher, he takes us back to the source of the problem, that old familiar story. Whether you have a faith conviction or not, nearly everybody knows the story of Adam and Eve in the garden. This, contained in these pages of Scripture, is also true. I want to read a short excerpt and then hear from Pastor Keller. He said to the woman, speaking of the serpent in Genesis 3, "Did God actually say you shall not eat of any tree in the garden?" And the woman said to the serpent, actually correcting him, "We may eat of the fruit of the trees in the garden, but God said you shall not eat of the fruit of the tree that's in the midst or the middle of the garden. Neither shall you touch it, lest you die." But the serpent said to the woman, "You will not surely die. For God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be open, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." Oh, this is another huge pivot point. Keller says this: humanity believed the serpent and this spiritual poison, this lie of the serpent. It passed deeply into us with its assertion that God was in fact restrictive, self-absorbed, and selfish, and that he could not be trusted to have our best interest at heart. If we obeyed him fully, the serpent implied, we would be miserable. This lie was both an assault on God's generosity and his integrity. Neither his character nor his words were to be trusted. Listen to this. This, in fact, is the lie which sinners have believed ever since. This lie has entered the bloodstream of the human race as the default heart condition deep in the human psyche. Now, at the bottom of our souls, whether we follow God's laws or not, human beings do not trust God's goodwill toward us. The sickness of sin had poisoned our bloodstream. Is that you? It's a rhetorical question. Of course it's you. It's all of us. That's what we have in common. But we mask our lack of trust in God as like healthy skepticism or intellectual fortitude. We don't realize it's actually just a lack of trust that has infected our bloodstream from the beginning. God knows. God knew. And instead of wiping us off the face of the earth for doubting his love for us, he doubled down. He doubled down. He went, "I can help." Can you imagine? Can you imagine being accused of something that was not true, being stiff-armed by somebody and saying, I want to help you. What can I do here? So he sent his son to die the death that we should have died if God had if God had actually condemned us for our unfounded rejection of him. John 3:17 says, "For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world." It is so much what we often think, but in order that the world might be saved through him. But like with any disease of the blood, it has wreaked havoc on our lives and brought us closer and closer to death with every passing day. This was never God's intent, but it's our reality. Until this, the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, that is what changed everything. So I actually want to play a short video. It's a video of Mike and Megan Wilson, beloved members of Monument Church. And man, they have themselves experienced the effect of sin in their marriage. Knowing their story and how God has worked in their desperation, it just provides an illustration of what the resurrection actually means. The resurrection can be very kind of ethereal, right? Very religious or something, for a good Easter sermon until it lands in real life. And the power of it actually changes life. What does it look like when the power that raised Jesus from the dead is at work in our lives? Well, we're going to see right now. So let's go ahead and play that video.
My mom had sent me a note and said, "You need to go meet Melinda, my oldest sister's new roommate." And I told her absolutely not. And then my mom came back and said, "She's beautiful," and then proceeded to send me pictures of her. And so I said, "Fine." And so I went and met Megan at the mall.
I tried to pass off somebody else helping him in the store because he came in with his sister, Katie, and I thought they were together. So I was very weirded out. There was somebody staring at me.
And she goes, "Is there something you're looking for?" And I said, "Yeah, you." So that was our first interaction. Megan just about lost it. She was like, "Who is this idiot that has a mohawk and just leather jacket?" I looked like I was in the movie Grease.
I will say it was, I think for both of us, like love at first sight. Katie said she felt like she wasn't there, so it was, yeah.
It was magical. We started hanging out a little bit, and we didn't date right away. I say that we dated within a week and a half. But so a little backstory: I was not a Christian. I grew up in a Christian house, and I hated everything about Christianity.
For those first few times we hung out, I didn't know he wasn't a Christian. So that was a surprise. I went to his sister, Melinda, and I was like, how is this person who is so vocal and so enthusiastic and passionate not talking about God ever?
I knew how to talk to Christians. I grew up in a Christian house. I have fantastic parents. I was respectful, but I also knew, I would just kind of poke and twist. And so Megan, one of the first things I saw from her was her love for Jesus.
A part of me was like, these things, you grew up, you know this. So how do you, I think I actually shared with him that I could see past that exterior wall that he was putting up. And I was like, there are gifts you have that God's given you, and he wants to use those things for good. It was like a week later that you gave me a call.
I pretty much couldn't sleep the entire night. Woke up and went to my dad, and I just said, "Hey, I was sobbing. I was like, I don't know how my perspective has changed, but I want to follow Jesus." So I ended up waking up and praying with my dad super, super early in the morning. And that was a pretty defining moment in my life. I proposed, we got engaged and married in May 26th of 2012. Marriage is super easy, as everyone will tell you. Yeah, it was curveball after curveball. It was a lot of two very different people. As any marriage is, you are not the same person, but there was a lot of minimal understanding for me to Megan, from Megan to me. I would say things like, "That's not how my mom does it." And those were always winsome comments. She always really liked those. And it was just, it was tough. It was incredibly hard.
I think some triggering things for us early in marriage that weren't helpful is that we both would get to a point of kind of feeling maybe complacent or comfortable. And we'd both be like, hey, let's buy a different house or move, or let's get a dog, or let's have kids now. because why not? And instead of maybe sitting in a moment and being like, hey, this isn't really working, maybe we should be looking at our marriage and finding ways to make it succeed and to get along and heal and get counseling for our own pasts. We just threw something else in the mix to keep us busy. We always functioned very well as like business partners. And so we easily just would take that road to mask, I think, like the emotional and mental like disconnection that we had going on.
It was failure after failure after failure. And after about 9 years and 2 kids, Megan and I had separated. And at that moment, I was like, I couldn't have been more excited. I was like, let's just stop this cheese grater that we are in. I hated Megan. I loved my children, but felt like I couldn't live life where I could be on earth and have my kids see somebody that is a complete mental disaster.
The beginning, like March 2021, it just hit a point where I had kind of made all these New Year's resolutions where I was going to try all these things to be like the good wife, perfect wife, make this thing work. Because maybe if I just, fixed some of these things and I fell into the line of what I thought Michael wanted me to be, then we'd work it out. And it wasn't really working. I was like, well, maybe we have a baby. Maybe we do this. I tried thinking of all the things that could make us stay together and make it work. And we got to a point in March where he was ready to be done and ready to call lawyers, and took off his ring and was just like, we're done. And I was scared, of course, but I felt actually like, okay, walking away and just giving him to God.
I had sat down with Pat Cook, and he and I had caught up, and Pat had sent me a sermon that I had no intention of listening to whatsoever. It was talking about the testing of faith, and it went and said how the testing of faith produces endurance. And I was like, okay, this is super helpful. Thanks, Pat, for sending this. Thinking that I'm just supposed to just like muscle through this life. And then he goes and says, well, testing is not a test. And as he's saying this, I'm literally like, it literally piqued my interest, because I'm sitting there arguing with the sermon as he's saying, testing. And I'm like, okay, great. And he says, it's not a test. And I was like, okay, what next? Like, where are we talking now? And he says, the testing is the process of a silver maker making and refining silver. He then proceeds to say that the testing is when they heat the silver up so much that all the impurities rise to the surface, and the maker scoops off the impurities, and he will do it over and over and over again so that he can see his reflection, like see his eyes and his reflection. And at that moment, I broke down sobbing. And I remember at this moment, like when I was sitting on my bed, that it was like, you didn't understand that like my love was unconditional. It is in pursuit of you. It wasn't like, I hope that you can stay in my family. Like, I hope that like you can just muscle through and pass the tests and do these things. It was more of a, like, you didn't understand how burning his love is for me. And at that moment, it was pretty earth-shattering for me.
And then all of a sudden, this tune changed and he called me. And it was like an hour and a half of him letting me know what had happened, but also apologizing for things that I thought he didn't even know hurt me in the past. And I was definitely not sure what to make of it. And we got together a couple times, and it just was so different every time. There wasn't even like this, it just wasn't coming through. The old vein like wasn't coming through. There was, no matter if I was upset or I was communicating that I was frustrated and I didn't know what to make of it, I was met with humility and just a reassurance of him not wanting anything, just wanting to tell me what God was doing and that he was sorry. I honestly, I couldn't continue on being separated, because I was like, if this is truly a change, if he truly is like a new person in Jesus, and he isn't going back to what we had, how can I keep my kids from him, for one, and not continue in marriage, which God calls sacred, and this commitment is for life. We came back together, and it was rocky, but there was a peace that wasn't manufactured.
We've been meeting with a therapist for 2 years now, and that's been awesome.
I'd say the last 2 years since coming back together have been, in a sense, more difficult for me. Not, for those 9 years that we were together, I had a lot of coping mechanisms and I put up a lot of defenses that actually I felt in good spirits a lot of the time in a weird way, but I just didn't let myself. It's like I just wasn't going to let anything penetrate and stick. And it was almost once the apologies came, all of the pain and all of the anger came with it, and grief over 9 years feeling lost or whatever. Like it was just a lot that came. It's been very different from the first 9 years and different from that summer. I mean, we went from having parties, people drunk on our back patio, to going out there together and saying, we want this to be a place where the gospel is preached, where people are ministered to, where our girls grow up hearing the name of Jesus and hearing prayer. And I would say that the last 2.5 years have been such a reflection of God's just goodness and faithfulness in his spirit in this house, and being able to use it for so much good instead of, honestly, destruction.
Yeah, I love Megan more than anything in my life. She's my best friend, and we are in it together. We are not adversaries. We are not just co-working, but actually wanting best for our marriage going forward. And I love every bit of her. She's the best. Yeah.
He became more than what I would have ever asked God to have given me in a husband. But so much happened so quickly. The way he interacted with our girls differently, the way that he cared for me in a way that he had never done, or quickly apologizing when he hurt me, the way that he wanted to serve in the church. It's beyond what I could have asked God. He gave me far more than I could have imagined in a husband. And I think so often we look at marriage as just this thing that we have to fix. But in reality, it's two broken people not able to function together. And when we take the time to work on our own hearts with Jesus and heal those things, it's amazing how all the things that seem so huge in marriage aren't that big anymore, and they don't matter. When you are both have your eyes set on the cross and you're running that race together, the other stuff is trivial, and he gives you the grace for those things because he wants your marriage to succeed.
Yeah, I just want to give it up for Mike and Megan, who are quite vulnerable. There's a lot I love about that video. Number one, Brian Goulet did an incredible job. We worked on that for a while, and it really came out to something that we thought would tell their story, but also glorify God and really reveal the kind of community that we want to be. This isn't, now the glossy sheen is on and they're all good. As Megan said, it actually got harder. There's real honesty and integrity and vulnerability in that. So we're walking closely with them, and they shared as it was going, and it was messy. But actually making room for the work of Jesus. The power of the story is that it is entirely, directly, and inextricably linked to the resurrection, where the death of their marriage was imminent. The life that he brought them into is clear. And I'm also aware that in a group this large, we would have people that you may have experienced divorce, either in your family or you yourselves. And this is not to make light of that by any means. Our hearts are heavy with the pain of these things. My own parents were divorced. It's very difficult, but I just would appeal to all of us that whether it is our marriage or our work or our finances, he wants to bring life where there is death. That is what he is in the business of doing. If the resurrection is true, then it means that Jesus is God and everything he said is beneficial for dealing with the effect of sin on our lives. The resurrection means you're not alone. That whatever you're facing, he saw it coming long before it happened from the beginning of time and made a way out for you. I just want to ask you now, Are you trying to debunk the resurrection? Are you avoiding the remedy to our disease? Do you believe the diagnosis or do you disbelieve it and therefore reject the remedy? Why? How? Jesus laying in that tomb dead represents every one of us who are dead in our sins without the life-giving power of his resurrection. Why do we celebrate? Why do we jump up and down? Why do we scream? Why do we do cartwheels? Isn't it obvious? The grave clothes that bound him represent the restrictive nature of life without hope. The stone that blocked the tomb represents the obstacle that cannot be moved without help. What is standing in your way? You cannot overcome alone. But the absence of his buried body is evidence that by the power that raised him, we too can escape the death of this life and the life to come. You know, the shame of his death, he was naked, he was abused, he was mocked and scorned and laughed at. It was all erased by the fact that it couldn't hold him down. I'm just aware that so many people bear the shame of embarrassment and insecurity, and actually he did this to give you dignity and strength and confidence in who God has made you because he loves you. He traded shame for dignity in the resurrection. I just love what Mike said about the silver maker, this testing. We all think we're in some kind of test that we have to pass. Can you imagine if Jesus came all the way down from heaven, was born, died by crucifixion, and was resurrected, and there was still something we had to do? What's the piece I now need to do? How do I make this work for me? He's like, you didn't even have the idea to do this. This was my idea for you. And to Mike's relief, it's not another test I have to pass. I got to muscle through and be good. I actually just have to give myself to him and let him do his work. That is the good news. That is the good news of the gospel. Jesus is referred to as the great physician. He has come to heal the sickness. He says, and when Jesus heard the Pharisees mocking, why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners? He said, those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. I came not to call the righteous, but sinners. It was crazy this morning. I was late getting here. I wrote half my sermon on Comus Road. Why? Well, my son and I were driving to church, and there's a man in the middle of the road. Like he's going to get hit. He's wandering on the yellow line. This was an hour and a half ago. I'm like, what is going on? So I kind of pull up to him and I said, hey, buddy, are you okay? He was maybe mid-20s. And once we started talking, I could tell that he was probably mentally disabled. He was wandering around Comus Road, and I was like, oh my gosh. So I called the police. I just said, hey, well, first I called Charlie. Charlie knows what to do in these situations. Then I called the police, and I told them what was going on. And then I said, hey, can I help you? And he said, no, and he was scared, and he ran away. So I didn't know what to do, and I just thought, I can't just let him do this. There's cars coming to and fro. One of you could hit him. All these people coming to church, and I pulled up and I said, there's some pancakes. I'd love to take you for food. I'm like, he is never going to buy this. And it's like stranger danger. I said, I'm a pastor. I don't know if that helped or hurt. I said, here's my son, Emmett. And I introduced him. And then he said, okay, I'll get in the car. And then he ran away. And I just thought, this is us. This is us. We're wandering in the middle of the road. We're walking down the center line. And he thought he was fine. I talked to him a little bit more, and it found out he ran away from home. He got in trouble for something. I don't know if he hid something or lost something. I couldn't quite make it out. He ran away from home, and he was in danger. I just thought, this is us. You think you're fine. He thought he was fine. I was reaching out for help. He didn't want it. God is reaching out for help by the power of the resurrection, and we're resisting it. We're explaining it away. We're thinking through, no, I got this. He said, I got this. And I'm just like, no, you don't. So finally, Caesar and Francis and Andy came, and I don't know why, but they said to me, hey, what's going on? I don't know why, but I explained the situation. I said, maybe Andy can help. I don't know why I thought Andy can help. Andy's amazing, but I don't know, maybe Andy can help. Well, they try to get close to him, and he keeps running away, and then finally, he recognizes Andy. Whew. And he agrees to get in the car. And he comes over here. I don't know if we fed him pancakes. I hope we did. Good. But actually, the police came, and he was scared. The authority comes, and we get scared, don't we? God comes near, and we go, no, I don't trust you. And they were there to help. And then his dad came. And his dad didn't scold him. You know what his dad did? He wept. This was just right out here. And then we fed the cops some pancakes, too. It was outstanding. The father wept. You found my son. I've been looking for him. I've been very worried. That's every single person in this room. Why resist him? You're walking on a road. You're in danger. You're on the yellow line. You think you don't need help, but you do. We're going to get into some baptisms here pretty soon. But I want you to know, even though we have 13 planned, we will baptize whoever. We have shirts and towels. Last year we had a number of people who just said, no, actually, God's tugging on my heart. I've been resisting him. I know that I have been running away. I know that I need to come to him. I know that I need help. I am finally willing to admit it. It was actually Mike that was spontaneously baptized last year after all this stuff they had been through. And actually Megan's going to be baptized this year. She's never been baptized before. She's been a Christian for a long time, but actually had never been baptized. And you know, you can be a Christian for a long time and still be walking in the middle of the road. You know what she said? You know, one of the worst things that had happened to us is that every time things would get difficult, we would kind of, say, let's have a baby, or let's get a house, let's, get a dog. I love that she said that, because that's all of us. We are all inclined to cover it with something else. Do you know what the Bible calls that? Idolatry. I say that with a smile so you won't hate me. But it is. You say, well, what? No, isn't an idol like a wooden thing? No, it's something you create and you fix your eyes on that will make you happy. Let's have a baby. Let's get a house. Let's get a dog. We create things that will take the place of God, and they will always let us down. Isaiah 57 says, let's see if your idols can save you when you cry to them for help. Why, a puff of wind can knock them down. If you just breathe on them, they fall over. Putting your faith in anything else will always disappoint. He says, but whoever trusts in me will inherit the land and possess my holy mountain. God says, rebuild the road, clear away the rocks and stones, so my people can return from captivity. The high and lofty one who lives in eternity, the Holy One, says this, I live in the high and holy place with those whose spirits are contrite and humble. I restore the crushed spirit of the humble and revive the courage of those with repentant hearts. Can I encourage you? Turn away from whatever it is you are seeking to satisfy you and turn toward him.